Hello and welcome. I'm Mecklenburg County economist Michael Simmons. Thank you for joining us today for our Q1 economic forecast. As you're well aware, our economy currently faces a number of issues, from banking failures to high inflation rates, as well as shifts within the housing market. My goal here today is to inform both the public and elected leaders of our county of how these issues may affect them and local government finance. At the end of the slides, I'll post my contact information, and if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me directly. Thank you. Okay, today is April 6th. Any information you see on the slides is, of course, prior to this date. Pictured here is Freedom Park. It's one of our oldest and most well-known parks in the county. Holds many athletic and social events, and just one of the many 200-plus parks that we have in the county. Some of the topics of discussion that we're going to talk about today is we're going to do an overview of key macroeconomic indicators. We're going to talk about consumer spending and sales tax collection, and then really hit the housing market hard. For unemployment, the rates are still low despite economic conditions becoming increasingly less favorable. Labor force participation is on the rise but still remains below pre-recession levels. Unemployment rates are expected to rise over the next year. And then just recently, we got the JOLTS report, job openings, and they showed that they were down 632,000 in the month of February to 9.9 million. So job openings are also starting to fall. We expect that the unemployment rate will rise over the next year. Fourth quarter GDP increased by 2.7% over the third quarter, but is tracking towards slower growth in 2023. Residential fixed investment was the leading contributor to the decline, where new single-family construction and brokers' commissions were down 19% from the prior year. As you can see below, we have our forecast for 2023. We're looking at 0.7% growth in the first quarter, 1.2% in the second, and then we're expecting about a third quarter that we will enter a recession, growth coming in around 0.9%, followed by negative 2.6% growth in the fourth quarter. We expect this recession to be very limited and short in duration. The federal funds rate is the rate of interest that banks use to lend each other overnight and is set by the Federal Reserve. Currently, it's at a range between 4.75 to 5%. The high range in the fourth quarter of 2023 is right now expected to be 5.9% with a median range of 5.1. What we're looking at over the next couple of quarters is possibly 1 to 2 quarter basis point changes. As you can see from the graph on the lower left, at the start of the year in March, the Federal Reserve issued their first quarter point adjustment, moving to 50 basis points, then to 475 basis point hikes. And then since December, they've shifted back down to 50 basis points, now to 25 basis points hikes over the last two. And like I said, if we get any more, these at 1 or 2, we're also expecting them to come in as a quarter basis point hike. Mortgage rates have recently pulled back after they soared past 7%. High interest rates will continue to be a drag on the economy. Rates are expected to fall over the next year as the economy slows, and the banking failure with Silicon Valley Bank has really worked to decrease mortgage rates due to the changing perceptions of how the Fed will react to inflation. In the chart above, you can see that mortgage rates have been slowly drifting downwards since the 80s and really come to the lowest point that we have seen in at least a generation. You're right past 2021. Since then, rates have increased. We're, like I said, we hit 7. It's moved back down to 6% recently. But as you can see by the averages below in these expansionary periods, we're still near historical lows in interest rates. Inflation continues to moderate, but is still high at 6.41%. This is as of January on this graph here. Latest March data shows 6% in headline inflation, which is what this graph is tracking, and with core inflation being 5.5. But I wanted to show this graph because I really think it breaks out what is causing the inflation that we're seeing. The only category really posting negative year-over-year returns has been vehicles, and that's specifically new vehicles. Housing remains the largest year-over-year gain at 2.51%. And then you can see a lot of the moderation that we've seen since July is due to falling energy prices, which had been a major source of inflationary pressure. The CPI for all food increased by 0.7% from December 2022 to January 2023. And food prices were 10.1% higher than in January of 2022. Driving food inflation has been the combination of the second largest bird flu in modern history, the Ukrainian war with Russia, a drought along the West Coast, as well as rising labor, energy, and transportation costs. Consumer sentiment fell for the first time in 4 months, sitting about 5% below February and remaining 7% above the level of a year ago. Most of the loss in consumer sentiment in February was due to the failure at Silicon Valley Bank. Sentiment declines were concentrated among lower income, less educated, and younger consumers, as well as consumers with large amounts of stock holdings. This slide comes from the University of Michigan. It's slightly dated. It was back in, I think, November whenever they released this survey. And what it did was showed how consumers are responding to the inflation that we're seeing. The results showed that 8% of consumers have reported that they had stopped buying items with large price increases over the past year. 51% noted that they had cut back on their spending, while 39% stated that they had made no changes. The spending categories cut most by consumers included the food and groceries, and that was reported by 19% of households. Household items, and including durable goods, was the second largest at 13%, and then eating out, entertainment was 12% of respondees. One of the effects of inflation has been decreased levels of savings. The graph shows both the level of personal savings in blue as well as the savings rate. You can see that overall personal savings has declined and is right now is $915 billion, whereas the personal savings rate has come down to 4.6%. Now this is, you can look on the graph and see that prior to the recession, both the savings rate and the amount of savings that people was carrying was much higher. So not only are we seeing that consumers are spending out of their savings, they're also increasing their utilization of credit. Credit card balances have risen fast. They're up 31% since April of 2021 and also up 12% since the COVID peak. Delinquency rates are currently at 2.25% as of the fourth quarter of 2022. Rates have started to increase since Q3 of 2021, but overall the delinquency level still remains very low compared to the past. Retail sales growth continues to slow. In March, retail sales were up 3.9% year over year, but down 0.4% from the last month. The biggest decreases were seen in the sales at furniture stores, which was down 2.5%, food and services down 2.2%, and then miscellaneous retailers at 1.8%. Some of the increases that we've seen in non-store retailers, this would include your online businesses, e-commerce. Health was up 0.9%, and food and beverages stores, they were up 0.5%. So shifting away from sales, let's focus more on local housing markets, office markets. First, looking at office occupancy. Occupancy rates increased above 50% since the first time since the pandemic. While some may see this as a return to the office, which has happened to an extent, it could also be due to older spaces becoming outdated and obsolete and just basically falling out of the market. Charlotte and Raleigh markets continue to add more space as both are highly desirable locations to move to. On our next slide here, we see that within the 10 cities that is shown here, Charlotte is not included, but you can see that depending on the day of the week really is determining the high and low occupancy. Most cities are averaging around 33.8% on the lowest day of the week, which is a Friday, and the highest day of attendance was on Tuesdays at 58.8%. For our local housing market, we've seen a significant change over the past few months. I'm going to get into a lot of these. We'll dive into them individually. But first, if we take a look here at housing affordability, we can see that principal and interest payments as a percentage of income hit 25.6% in December. Affordability has been negatively impacted by rising interest rates and rising home values. However, home price growth has slowed to some extent, and mortgage rates are expected to decline. And hopefully that'll help the affordability issue a little bit. So diving into some of the metrics that I showed you 2 slides ago, we'll first look at median sales price. From January to February, a median sales price fell to $399,000. This is up 3.6% from February of last year. When we look at average sales price, we see that it's up from January to $496,725. That's up 8% from the prior February. This slide shows that the percentage of the original listing price that the seller is getting when they sell the home. As you can see, we were at a peak of around 104.7% last summer. Currently, we are at 96%. So basically 4% off of the asking price is where we're seeing prices come in now. Last year, we were at 101.8 at the same time. And as you can see from the chart on the right, we're still low compared to kind of what we normally average around that 97% mark. Days on the market till sale has also moved up to quite a large degree. Last February in 2022, we were at 22 days on the market. We're currently sitting at 50 days on the market till sale. As you can see from the chart on the right, with the exception of 2015, 2016, this is the highest levels that we've seen since then in the month of February. Lastly, our inventory of available homes for sale. This is quite low. 1,409 homes. It is up from last year. Last year we only had 864 in February of 2022. So it's much better than it was, but still quite low. Overall, we're sitting at around 1 month supply of inventory, meaning that if no new homes come online, it'll take basically a month to clear everything out. And that is an improvement from 0.5 that we had February of last year. So a lot of the supply issues are starting to correct itself, but it's still very low compared to historical standards when we're talking about a market where we had about 3 months housing supply. So overall, looking forward, we still see that the housing market is undergoing extremely short supply. This is going to continue to push home prices up a little bit more. We're not seeing the same growth that we experienced last year, and nor do we expect it to grow that high again any time in the near future. If you're looking for additional information, please go to our website where you can find all of these economic reports as well as this video. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to contact me directly. My email and phone number are both listed below.